Hello again. Let's talk about Holy Communion, or as it's sometimes known, the Lord's Supper, or even the Eucharist. We all know that good food is a gift from God, and that time spent with good food builds relationships. All throughout the Old and New Testaments, we see God providing for His people through food and drink. Likewise, this communion meal is one way that God provides for us, His people, still today. In their gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all give special, detailed attention to this meal. In these words that Jesus Himself used at the Last Supper, we learn of the importance of communion. On the night when He was betrayed, He took bread. When He had given thanks, He broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, also He took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." Let's note that first sentence, that this meal took place on the night when Jesus was betrayed. His death and His sacrifice are embodied in this meal for us. But even in the darkest of His hours, Jesus lived and died for you and me. At this meal, when Jesus and His disciples were celebrating the traditional Jewish Passover together, Jesus took the ordinary elements of a holiday celebration, bread and a cup of wine, and He did something extraordinary. He gave thanks, as was the custom, but then He claimed that the bread was His body and the wine in the cup was His blood. He commanded His disciples to continue that tradition of the meal, that it would be celebrated by His followers throughout time in remembrance of Him. And this is key. Jesus promised that eating this bread and drinking from this cup would give us the same forgiveness of sins that He Himself earned on our behalf through His death on the cross. Through these words of Jesus, and also in the teachings of the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, we learn these truths about communion. Christ wants us to remember His death often in this meal. He wants us to use bread and wine to celebrate His sacrifice. He wants us to believe that what He's claimed, that this bread and this wine are His very body and His blood. And He wants us to know in our heart of hearts the promise of this meal, that Christ died for you. Like in baptism, Christ gives us a real physical practice that's not only a reminder of His grace, but it's a literal carrier of the grace and forgiveness that God gives. Lutherans teach this understanding of communion by what we refer to as real presence. Christ is really present. His body and blood are in, with, and under the ordinary bread and wine. We believe in the real presence of God in this sacrament because we trust the plain words of Jesus. This is my body. This is my blood. In Psalm 46, verse 1, we're reminded that God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. And in our worship together, we come to the Lord's Supper as a united community. We celebrate and remember Jesus, where He's truly present, strengthening our faith and preserving us to life everlasting.